Welcome back. Today I want to talk about Samadhi as therapy. Now, that's something you may have never heard before. So usually we talk about enlightenment in terms of having the non-dual state. And that means that we have first entered the low idle state. So the body has become extremely tranquil. And that peace in the body reflects on the mind. The mind becomes extremely tranquil. And then we enter into an expanded state, which is absorption, and then finally the non-dual state. That's what we're getting absorbed into. We're getting absorbed into the right brain. And when that happens, we enter a state of non-dual, where there is no him and me. That's dual, right? It's just one. It was just one, right? And that's why you have these very, very deep yogis coming out and they say, I am that. That's the non-dual state. So that's a samadhi. And sometimes we think that this will just happen and we're done. And so I want to introduce this idea of samadhi therapy and tell you one of my favorite stories from a very, very deep student. So let's get into it. So like I said, first we enter into that very low idle state. We have to have the heart rate variability resonance between the heart and the breath, right? We have to have those two together. And that means that on the in-breath, the heart rate will raise a little bit. It will actually go up. And then as we breathe out and we make that out-breath longer, do you guys remember that rule? AMOL. Always make the out-breath longer, right? That rule will set us up for success with the parasympathetic system. What is the parasympathetic system? It's the very deep system of relaxation, rejuvenation, and healing. So we're getting into that parasympathetic system with that very long out-breath. That's what enables this low idle state. It reflects back on the mind. The mind starts to become more and more peaceful. And then because of all of this, it all comes together. We enter into a very, very shallow and slow breath rate. And that's the tranquil breath. So if you suddenly notice that I kind of lost myself in my meditation momentarily, and now I'm looking at my breath, and this breath is so shallow, and it's slow, it's so weird. It's weirder than the breath state that I was doing on my own, right? I was controlling my breath, and now I've let go of my breath, and suddenly my breath it's like I'm watching somebody sleeping. That's the tranquil breath. Oh my God, it's so huge. It's like you're watching somebody sleeping, and it's enabled because you're getting into the freeze response. So I talk about we got to have tranquil breath and the freeze response, but they're actually married. They're actually married together. And we're creating those two at the same time. So if you have the tranquil breath, it means you're getting some freeze response. And if you have some freeze response, it means you're getting probably some tranquil breath. Those two things, and then the Om Japa in the chakras, that unlocks us, right? It's kind of unlocking us from being outward. And so we're going back in. It assists in that roll up of consciousness into the brain. That's what I call it, a roll up of your consciousness into the brain. So the consciousness has separated from being glued to the outside and it's now rolling up into the brain. And that really sets us up. Now we're ready. This is the low idle state. This is everything yoga was trying to create. You read the Bhagavad Gita, what does it mean? It's all about the dorsal vagal complex. And when the Pandavas win, you have won. You are in this very low idle state. And then they go up the mountain. That is you watching your consciousness ascend, watching your consciousness roll up back into the brain. Now we're in the perfect place. Now we can concentrate for the very first time very, very one-pointedly and very deeply and very easily, because there's no distraction. In that place where we concentrate on the infinite form of the divine, the higher self, we concentrate on the whole universe, and that's what enables absorption. That's what finally merges our consciousness with that, and we enter the non-dual state. And so, and so you think, oh, great, I had a samadhi, I'm done. No, it doesn't work that way. You go back into that state over and over and over again, and it becomes its own kind of therapy. And so one of my students, he called me up, and this is, I can't think of a more favorite story than this. I love this story. He calls me on the phone. Forrest. Yes. I feel myself in other people. I'm like, that's great. That's perfect. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. You're feeling your consciousness, and you're feeling your consciousness there. And that's you. And you recognize it. Forrest. No, Forrest. Listen. I feel myself in the table. That's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. I just love that story. That's perfect. You feel, well, how can that be? I'm feeling myself in an inanimate object, but consciousness is one, right? This is quantum physics, all right? If you don't understand this, study quantum physics. You want to understand non-duality? Study quantum physics. Consciousness is in everything. It's everywhere. To put this in terms of your brain, your right brain sees everything as one. Everything. I'm that, and I'm that, and I'm that. So when you touch on the right brain, and when you do samadhi therapy, you do that over and over again because you're having the samadhi therapy. You go into the samadhi, you come out, and you still have the effects. You still have some contact with the right brain. And so you continue those effects, right? And you walk around your daily life, and you're having this mini samadhi experience. So you're not frozen in place like the first samadhi, right? Like that deep state of meditation, but you're walking around and you're having these effects of the samadhi. That's the result of the samadhi therapy of meditation that you've been after all this time, right? So the right brain sees the table, it sees the person, it says, yeah, I'm that. That's how the right brain works. Everything is one. That's me and everything. I'm this, I'm that, I'm everything. It sees it all as one. The right brain takes all of your input and says, I'm all of that. It projects it on the movie screen inside of your brain. It says, I am all of that. The left brain says, well, I'm this little guy here in the center of the story. But the right brain says, no, I'm everything. And so that's the samadhi therapy. And I like to say, it's, do you remember the old computers, and you would hit reformat, and it would show these lines of the code inside the computer, right? The files, and it would start rearranging the code, right? It would start, it would eat at that code, and it would shorten it down and clean it up and rearrange it so it was all in line. That's what's happening to our brain, very, very slowly. Somebody sent me this wonderful book from India. This is Pithy Sains from Shayam Sharan Lahir Mashaya. This is number 12. The one who is liberated is always liberated, even if he stays in the pre-transcendental state of Kriya. That is, the state before the emergence of the Absolute. He remains non-dual, envisions Brahma in everything, and being firmly affixed in Brahma, stays effortlessly. If this does not come to a yogi, then he falls short of spiritual attainment. That's what we're talking about. That is the culmination of the samadhi therapy. You go into the samadhi, you come out, and it's reformatting your brain. And so the yogi likes to say that the veil of illusion is getting thin, right? So it used to be, okay, well, that's my car, and that's so and so, and he's a jerk, and he's nice, and yada yada yada. All of that begins to become reformatted. So you see each of these things more and more like, well, that's the outward form, but there's this inside that I'm feeling, that I am sensing, that I'm aware of, where the right brain is seeing everything as one, and you're recognizing your kinship with everything. And that's what we're talking about. That's what Lahiri Mashaya is talking about in this quote here. The Samadhi therapy and the culmination of that. He begins to see the absolute everywhere. He experiences it inside of his own consciousness. He says, here it is inside of me, and there it is inside of that person, and there it is in the table. I just love that story. I feel myself in other people. Good, yeah. I feel myself in the table. I just love this. It's so fantastic. That is the Samadhi therapy. Now, if you're not going into Samadhi, it can be kind of, Forrest keeps talking about the Samadhi, and these yogis talk about Samadhi, and it's driving me nuts. I'm not going into Samadhi. How can I go into the Samadhi? Well, I gave you the map at the beginning of the video, right? That's the way we go, right? Okay, so don't fret. And before we get into the Samadhi, we might have a mini absorption, right? So I talked about that in one of the past videos, where we're sitting in meditation and suddenly we feel like the space around us, it's become a part of us. And the yogi might say, well, I feel my auric field, right? But what's really happening is that the right brain is beginning, you're starting to touch on the right brain, and the right brain sees everything around you as part of itself. And so we begin to extend that perception. And that's the beginning of it. It's just a tiny little mini absorption, very small. And so you still have the left brain, and you still have contact with the right brain. And just that little contact, it's beginning that Samadhi therapy. So if you haven't gone into the full non-dual state, if you're getting these little mini absorptions, you might already be perceiving this kind of transformation of your consciousness. And that's the whole goal of yoga. That's that transformation, that deep realization and understanding and knowing that the absolute is in me, and the absolute is out there, and it's all there. It's all there. So that's the path we're on in yoga and meditation. It's this deeper and deeper realization, if that's our goal. Maybe we just want to relax with heart rate variability. That's perfect. I love it. It's going to reflect. I wanted to show you there. Can you see some of that red splotchiness in my fingers? Right now, I have HHH, hands hot and heavy, right now. So my parasympathetic system, even though I'm talking to you, I'm using a lot of my left brain to do this communication, I'm still in the parasympathetic. That dorsal vagal is still activated, and my hands are hot and heavy, and they're full of blood. That's what creates the warm or the hot and heavy feeling, is the blood accumulating. Because you're in the parasympathetic, you're not in a stress state. And so the more we do that heart rate variability, the more we stay in that heart rate variability resonance. And it's just magical. You stay more and more in the parasympathetic system. You recognize more and more when you're out of it. You're like, that's not fun. It's not as fun as that parasympathetic. I want to get back. It's so fun. So that is beautiful all in of itself. And if you have those mini absorptions, that as well is beautiful, and it's going to begin that transformation, that reformatting of your mind to understand this unity of the universe, right? So everybody who studies quantum physics, they're looking for that ultimate equation, aren't they? But the yogi is realizing the ultimate equation. So I hope you love this. I have a number of students going into Samadhi, and I wanted to make sure that I talk about this in a video. I know I've talked about Samadhi therapy on Patreon, but I wasn't sure. I don't think I've talked about it on video yet. So this will be the first video talking about, I believe, about Samadhi therapy, how this is created over time by dipping back into the infinite over and over and over again, and how it transforms our left brain understanding. It creates this very powerful connection with the right brain, And it's the right brain that sees everything as one, that enables that non-dual state. And so we start to carry that with us like a little treasure in our heart. So I hope you love this. If you did, be sure to hit that bell down below so I can see all of you next time.